So this video is going to be a two-part video. The first part is going to show you how to pull in compression springs and do some work with them and get them ready for assemblies in OnShape. And then the second part is going to show you how to pull in tension springs and do the same thing. So for the first part, we're going to go get a compression spring. We're going to download it, or download the model from McMaster-Carr, pull that model into OnShape, do some work with it, and then get it ready for use in assemblies. So I'm going to go to our canvas page. I'm going to go to the page where we have our spring sizing, so our spring sizing toolbox. Go down to where we have the table of the 6 springs we have available. Just for demonstration, I'm going to use this top spring. I'm going to copy the spring number. I'm going to go to the McMaster-Carr website. And in the search bar, just paste that number, hit enter. It'll pop up all the springs, and the one right here where it pops up highlights that number. This is that same spring. That is a 2-inch spring with a 0.61-inch inner diameter and a 0.72-inch outer diameter. So to download it for OnShape, make sure it says 3D SolidWorks. Hit download. It'll download onto your computer into your downloads. I'm going to go back to OnShape. Close out of this. Hit that plus. Hit import. Make sure you go to downloads. And then click on that spring you just downloaded, hit open, hit import, OnShape will pull it in, and now it is in your OnShape as a 3D model. So here it is. We do need to do a little bit of work with it to get it ready for actually building assemblies in OnShape. So to do that, we're going to put a cylinder inside the spring and then create some connector mates using that cylinder. So to first create the cylinder, we're going to go to sketch. I'm going to rotate the spring because of the fact that it is sitting on the top plane. So we have the front plane, the right plane, and the top plane. So it is sitting on the top plane. So I'm going to rotate it like this so it's right below the top plane. So again, the top plane is right there. I'm going to click on that top plane, and then I'm going to come over here, click on circle. Click right there in the origin, because the way that OnShape pulls the spring in is it puts it right at the origin. So I'm going to click the start of my circle at that origin. I'm going to drag it out, click with the mouse, and then type 0.61. The reason I'm doing 0.61 is because of the fact that on the McMaster-Carr page, that spring I chose has an inner diameter of 0.61 inches. So now back to OnShape, I'm going to hit check. I'm going to come up here and click on extrude and click that circle I just made. I'm going to make sure I click on new. So I'm making a new part. I'm going to make the extrude 2 inches long because I'm working with a 2-inch spring. And then I'm going to hit check. So now I have a cylinder that is the exact width of the inside of the spring and the exact length of the spring I'm using. So now I'm going to go ahead and rotate back to the original view, so where the spring is sitting on top of the plane. We're going to create some mates that we will use for making assemblies. So to do that, I'm going to come up here to the top of OnShape, come over here, find this symbol, click the drop down, click on Mate Connector. So I've got my Mate Connector window open now. I'm going to click on the top of the cylinder, and then I'm going to come back over here. I'm going to click where it says owner part. I'm going to click on X and then click on the spring. So now it says owner part 1. So the spring is now the owner of that Mate Connector. I'm going to hit the check. I'm going to do that again. So do Mate Connector again. This time I'm going to click on where it says on entity, make that drop down, choose on between entities. Click the top of the circle or top of the cylinder, the bottom of the cylinder, and again where it says owner part, hit X and then click on the spring. It says owner part 1, and then hit check. So now I have a Mate Connector right in the middle of the spring, and then I'm going to do one more Mate Connector, and then click on the bottom of the cylinder, and again change it from owner part to the spring as the owner part, and then hit check. Then I'm going to come over here to my parts list. Part 1 is the spring, part 2 is the cylinder. I'm going to click on the eye to hide the cylinder. So now we have the spring with our make connectors defined. So now we can go to an assembly and add the spring however we want it. So I'm going to add a new assembly. Come up here to do insert. I'm going to add the spring, but don't just click on the spring. Click on the arrow and click on part 1, which is just the spring. We don't need the cylinder added. So just click on part 1. We have our spring now. Put it wherever you want it. And then for the first part, I'm going to do a barrel, which is a random barrel I made, kind of to be similar to that PVC pipe you have. Put it wherever I want it. Hit check. And so now I'm going to put the spring in that barrel. So now to do that, I'm going to use a fasten mate. Click on the bottom connector of the spring, and then rotate back up here, and then click on the bottom connector inside the barrel. The spring will snap into place. And so now you can see that the spring is inside the barrel. So now to hide those connector mates, I'm going to come over here to my part list again, hit the arrow next to part 1, and hide the mate connectors. So now you just have a barrel with a spring inside of it. But let's say you have a push rod, or you have a rod that you want the spring to go on. So I'll do an assembly like that too. So go back to plus, do another assembly. I'm going to pull in the rod, which is the random rod I made, and then again pull in the spring and put it wherever I want it. Hit check. Use a fasten mate. Click on the bottom of the spring and the bottom of the rod. It'll snap to place. And now you've got your spring around your push rod. And again, I'm going to hide those mate connectors. So now you've got your nice push rod with your spring and your nice barrel with the spring in it. So we know how to pull compression springs into OnShape. So let's look at how to pull tension springs in. So you can create things like this or this, however you have your design built. So first, we'll again go to Canvas. We're going to highlight or copy this spring number just because I'm using the first one for an example. So we're going to copy that number, go to McMaster Car again, paste it in, hit enter. We're going to look at this spring. It's a 1.5 inch spring. We're going to go again, make sure it says 3D SolidWorks, hit download. You'll see it pop up in your downloads. I'm going to go ahead and close that. Go back to OnShape. I have it pulled in here. I'm going to go ahead and delete it so you can see how I made this. So delete that. Delete these two assemblies real fast so we can recreate them when I'm done with this. Hit plus, hit import. Click on the spring you just downloaded from McMaster Car. Click on import. OnShape will again bring it in. Close out of this. Here's the tension spring we just downloaded when OnShape gets done loading it in. So this spring is that tension spring we just downloaded. So we're going to do the same thing we did with the compression spring, which is create a cylinder inside of it to create connector mates off of. So for this one, since the spring is sitting on the top plane, but it's running perpendicular to the right plane, we're going to choose the right plane as the plane we're going to sketch on. So we're going to go to sketch, click on the right plane. I'm going to zoom in on this. We're going to click on the circle. We're going to click at the origin right there. I'm going to drag the circle out, click, do 0.2 inches. The reason we're doing 0.2 is because this spring does not specify an actual inner diameter. We just know the outer diameter. So we're going to make the cylinder just a little bit less than that outer diameter, like 0.2 inches in this case, because all we're doing is making a cylinder to make the connector mates off of and then not using it. So the diameter is not super important, so we're just going to make it a little bit less than that outer diameter. So now we're going to go to, we're going to hit check. We're going to go to extrude now. Click on that circle we just made. So now, since our circle is right in the middle of the spring, we're going to click on symmetric. And then we're going to make it 1.5 inches. We're going to make sure we do new again. So again, new 1.5 inches, and we're doing 1.5 inches because this is a 1.5 inch spring, and then symmetric. So that's going to make it go 0.75 inches this way, 0.75 inches this way. This entire thing is now a 1.5 inch extrude. So we're going to hit check. We've now got our cylinder. We're going to go ahead and make our connector mates. So go back to the top of OnShape, find this symbol again, hit that drop down, click on Mate Connector. We're going to click on the top circle again. And when it gets done preparing the Mate Connector, it'll do it here in a second. So we've got our connector up here on the face. We're going to do it again where we change the owner to the spring. So click on X next to part 2. Click on the spring. And so now we have a connector at the top. They'll be owned by the spring. And that connector is going to be right on the inside of this loop. So we're going to hit the check. We're going to do the Mate Connector again. We're going to change it from on entity to between entities. Click on that face, rotate down, click on this face, hit the X next to part 2 again, and then click on the spring. So now we have a Mate Connector right in the middle that is owned by the spring, and then we're going to do one more Mate Connector. Click on the Mate Connector, rotate down, click on the bottom face, now it says the face of extrude again, and then change the owner from part 2 to the spring. So hit that X and then click on the spring and hit check. So now we have 3 connectors, one at the top, one at the bottom, one in the middle. We're going to go ahead and hide that cylinder we made, and then we're going to look at these connectors, and you can see that that connector is right on the inside of this loop. Same thing as this connector, right on the inside of that bottom loop. So now the spring is ready to be used in some assemblies. So now we're going to go ahead and create a new assembly to use the spring in. So I'm going to go over here and do plus, create assembly. I'm going to pull in my arm, the first one, which is just a random drawing I made to show how to put the spring between these 2 holes. I'm going to pull in the spring. Remember, we don't need the whole spring because that would pull in the spring and the cylinder. So we just need the spring, which is part 1. Put that wherever you want it. Hit check. We're going to do another fasten mate. We're going to rotate over here, click on that top loop. We're going to click on the bottom. I'm going to click right in the middle of my drawing here, which corresponds to the middle of the circle. You'll see why here in a minute. So I'm going to put the circle there, or put the spring there. I'm going to rotate it to make sure that the spring is hooked through the circle. I'm going to use this to flip the primary axis to make sure it goes between the holes. And now there's the issue of it's hooked right into the material here. It's not going through the hole. To fix that, I'm going to go to offset. I'm going to change the Z offset and make it 0.05. The reason I did 0.05 is because I know the distance from here to the bottom of the circle is 0.05 inches. I know that because I drew this. You can find that out in your own drawing. So now I have a spring between 2 holes. So you can imagine if you had something pulling on these holes, the spring would be stretching out. So I'm going to do another assembly to show another example. So do another assembly. Go over here and insert. I'm going to add the one I call pins, and then add my spring again. Hit check. So now we're going to put the spring on these little rods and these little pins. And we're going to do a fastened again. This time, since this is circular, OnShape will find the center of the circle. So we can just kind of take your mouse, hover over this until that pops up in the middle. Click on it. And then I want it to be on the middle of the dowels or on the pins. So I'm not going to put it here, I'm going to put it right here on this middle. And then again, I'm going to rotate it until it lines up. Hit check, and there you have your spring between the two pins. And again, the example there is to think about those pins being stretched apart and the spring being stretched out. And remember, if you want to hide the connectors, come over to the assembly, click the arrow to get the drop down, and then hide those connectors. And now it's just your spring and your pins in this case.